Welcome, dearest listener, to What If Sleep's Storian, where the boundaries between worlds dissolve and beloved characters step beyond the pages of their original tales. Here, in the hushed hours between day and night, a brilliant detective might find himself pondering mysteries woven from the threads of the ordinary, where a single knock at the door could unravel the quiet of a Sunday morning into a tapestry of intrigue. Each story begins with a simple question: what if? And unfolds into a gentle weave of wonder, curiosity, and dreams. Tonight, we begin with something a little introspective, a touch melancholic, yet threaded with the quiet thrill of discovery. If these stories bring you comfort or spark your imagination, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. So dim the lights, find your most comfortable position, and let these whispered narratives carry you softly towards sleep. The year is 1888, and London awakens slowly under a sky heavy with the weight of late autumn. The air is thick with the scent of coal smoke, curling upward from countless chimneys, mingling with the damp, earthy breath of the Thames. It's a Sunday morning, and the city, for once, seems to pause. No clatter of hansoms rushing through the streets, no cries of newsboys hawking the latest scandal. Just the soft patter of rain against cobblestones and the distant toll of church bells, their notes muffled by the fog that clings to the city like a lover reluctant to let go. Picture yourself here, in the heart of Baker Street, where the world feels both vast and intimate. The street is narrow, lined with brick houses that lean slightly toward one another, as if sharing secrets. The gas lamps, still burning from the night before, cast a faint golden glow, their light struggling against the mist. Can you imagine the smell of the air back then? The sharp tang of soot, the faint sweetness of wet leaves trodden underfoot, the distant whiff of bread baking in some nearby oven. It's a world alive with sensation, yet heavy with the weight of survival. This isn't the London of grand balls and glittering chandeliers, not the romantic city of poets' dreams. This is the London of grit and grime, where every day is a quiet battle to keep the cold at bay, to fill the belly, to hold fast against the uncertainty of life. Inside 221B Baker Street, the world feels softer, warmer, though no less alive. The fire in the hearth crackles gently, sending shadows dancing across the walls, where books and papers are stacked in precarious towers. The room smells of old leather, pipe tobacco, and the faint chemical tang of Sherlock Holmes's latest experiment, a concoction bubbling softly on a side table, its purpose known only to him. The furniture is worn but comfortable, the kind of chairs that hold the shape of their occupants like a memory. A violin rests in its open case, its strings catching the firelight, and a half-finished cup of tea sits forgotten on the mantel. This is a place of thought, of quiet chaos, where the ordinary and the extraordinary collide. Dr. John Watson sits by the window, a newspaper spread across his lap, though his eyes drift more to the street below than to the words before him. The rain has left a sheen on the cobblestones, and he watches a lone figure hurry past, umbrella tilted against the drizzle. His fingers trace the edge of the paper, the ink smudging slightly under his touch, and he breathes in the faint mustiness of the newsprint, a smell that always feels like a tether to the world outside. Watson is a man of steady habits, finding comfort in the rhythm of a quiet Sunday. His breakfast, cold toast and a smear of butter, a sip of strong tea, sits heavy in his stomach, grounding him in this moment of rare peace. The war in Afghanistan, the scars it left on his body and mind, feels distant today, softened by the warmth of the fire and the familiarity of this cluttered room. Across the room, Sherlock Holmes is anything but still. Even in repose, he's a storm contained, his long fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the arm of his chair. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, flit from the bubbling vial on his table to the window, then back again, as if the world itself is a puzzle he cannot help but solve. His dressing gown, a deep burgundy, hangs loosely over his frame, and his hair is slightly dishevelled, as though he's run his hands through it one too many times. The air around him hums with the faint scent of his pipe, a blend of tobacco so particular it could only belong to him. Holmes is not a man made for quiet Sundays, yet here he is, caught in a rare moment of stillness, his mind whirring like a machine that never truly stops. What would it feel like to live in this world, dear listener? To wake each morning to the clatter of coal carts, to taste the bitter edge of tea brewed too long, to feel the damp chill of a London autumn seep into your bones. This was a city of contrasts, where beauty and hardship walked hand in hand, where the glow of a gas lamp could feel like a promise or a warning. For Watson, this Sunday morning is a gift, a rare pause in the whirlwind of their lives. For Holmes, it is a challenge, a blank canvas that begs for a mystery to fill it. And then a sound, a sharp, deliberate knock at the door. It's not the timid tap of Mrs. Hudson, their landlady, nor the hurried rap of a client in distress. It's measured, almost too precise, as if the visitor has calculated the exact force needed to be heard but not to intrude. Watson glances up from his paper, his brow furrowing slightly. Holmes's fingers pause mid-tap, his head tilting like a predator catching the scent of prey. The fire pops in the hearth, and the room seems to hold its breath. "Who could that be?" Watson murmurs, more to himself than to Holmes. His voice is warm, tinged with the faintest trace of his northern roots, a grounding contrast to the sharp clarity of Holmes's speech. He sets the newspaper aside, the pages crinkling softly, and rises from his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. The air feels heavier now, charged with the possibility of something new. Holmes does not answer immediately. His eyes narrow, and he leans forward, elbows resting on his knees, as if the knock itself is a cipher to be decoded. "A man," he says at last, his voice low and precise, "of middle height, judging by the force and angle of the sound. He wears boots, not shoes. The resonance suggests a heavier sole, likely polished but worn at the heel. A professional perhaps, but not one accustomed to visiting Baker Street. Curious." Watson chuckles softly, a sound like the rustle of dry leaves. "You've deduced all that from a single knock?" Holmes's lips twitch. Not quite a smile, but close enough to soften the sharpness of his features. The world speaks, Watson, if one knows how to listen. A knock is as revealing as a footprint or a cigarette ash. Now, shall we see what this particular voice has to say? The knock comes again, just as measured, just as deliberate. Watson moves toward the door, his limp barely noticeable today, though the ache in his shoulder twinges as he reaches for the handle. The wood is cool under his palm, the grain worn smooth by years of use. He opens the door and the faint scent of wet wool and city damp wafts in, carried by the figure standing in the shadowed hallway. The visitor is a man, as Holmes predicted, of average height but with a presence that seems to fill the space. His coat is dark, damp at the shoulders, and his hat is tilted just enough to obscure his eyes. His hands are gloved, and in one he holds a small parcel wrapped in brown paper, tied with a piece of twine. The parcel is unremarkable, yet something about it draws Holmes's gaze immediately, his eyes locking onto it with the intensity of a man who sees not just an object, but a story. "Good morning," the man says, his voice smooth but with an edge of hesitation, as if he's not entirely sure he's in the right place. "I am looking for Mr. Sherlock Holmes." Watson steps aside, gesturing for the man to enter. "You found him. Come in, please. It's a dreary day out there." The man nods, stepping into the room, and the firelight catches his face for the first time. He's younger than Watson expected, perhaps in his early 30s, with a face that might be handsome if it weren't so drawn, so pale. His eyes are sharp, not unlike Holmes's, but there's a weariness in them, a shadow that speaks of sleepless nights or unspoken burdens. He removes his hat, revealing hair the colour of wet sand, neatly combed but slightly dishevelled by the rain. Holmes rises from his chair, his movements fluid, almost feline. "You have my attention, sir," he says, his tone deceptively light. "But I suspect you already knew you would. That parcel in your hand, It's not a gift, nor is it yours by right. A delivery, perhaps, but one you're reluctant to part with. Why? The man stiffens, his gloved fingers tightening around the parcel. For a moment the only sound is the soft crackle of the fire and the distant drip of rain from the eaves. Then he speaks, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "You're as perceptive as they say, Mr. Holmes. I need your help. This parcel, it's a matter of life and death. Can you feel it, listener? The shift in the air, the way a single moment can tip the balance of a quiet morning into something entirely unknown. Imagine standing in that room, the warmth of the fire at your back, the faint scent of tobacco and chemicals in the air, and the weight of a stranger's words settling over you like a fog. What would you do in a world like this, where every knock at the door could be the beginning of a mystery?" Holmes's eyes gleam, and Watson knows that look all too well. The spark of a mind that thrives on the unknown, that finds joy in the unravelling of secrets. The Sunday morning, so calm and ordinary just moments ago, is no longer a pause but a prelude. And as the visitor begins to speak, his words weaving a tale of loss and desperation, the room at 221B Baker Street becomes a stage where the ordinary meets the extraordinary and the story begins to unfold. The narrative pauses here, dear listener, not because the story ends, but because it breathes, like the city outside waiting for the next moment to unfold. Settle deeper into your blankets, let the rain and the firelight linger in your mind, and rest assured that the tale of this quiet Sunday at 221B Baker Street will continue, carrying you gently toward dreams. The fire in the hearth at 221B Baker Street snaps softly, its warmth curling through the room like a sigh, pushing back the chill of the autumn morning. Outside, the rain continues its gentle rhythm, a steady drip against the window panes blending with the distant hum of London, a city that never truly sleeps, even on a Sunday. The air inside carries the faint bitterness of Sherlock Holmes's chemical experiments, mingling with the richer notes of pipe tobacco and the lingering warmth of tea gone cold. The visitor stands just inside the doorway, his damp coat glistening faintly in the firelight, the brown paper parcel clutched in his gloved hands like a talisman. His face, now fully revealed, is pale, his eyes darting between Holmes and Watson with a mixture of hope and unease. Dr. Watson, ever the steady presence, gestures to a chair near the fire. "Please, sir, sit. You look as though you've walked through half of London to get here." His voice is warm, grounded, the kind that invites trust. He moves to the sideboard, where a decanter of brandy sits, its amber glow catching the light. The glass clinks softly as he pours a measure, the sharp, sweet scent of the liquor cutting through the room's heavier aromas. A touch of this, perhaps, to take the edge off the damp. The visitor hesitates, then nods, setting the parcel carefully on his lap as he sinks into the chair. The upholstery creaks under his weight, and he removes his gloves, revealing hands that are steady but marked with faint ink stains, the kind that speak of long hours at a desk. "Thank you, Dr. Watson," he says, his voice low, almost lost in the crackle of the fire. "My name is Edward Carver. I didn't know where else to turn." Sherlock Holmes remained standing, his long frame casting a shadow across the cluttered rug. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, fix on the parcel, though his expression remains unreadable, a mask of curiosity and calculation. He leans against the mantel, one hand resting lightly on the edge, his fingers brushing the cold metal of a letter opener left there carelessly. "Mr. Carver," he says, his voice a low, measured cadence, "you've come to me with a matter you claim is life and death, yet you hesitate. The parcel you carry is not yours, nor is it a simple delivery. Its weight troubles you, not physically, but in what it represents. Tell me, what is it, and why does it bring you to my door?" Carver's fingers tighten around the glass of brandy, the liquid trembling slightly as he lifts it to his lips. The taste is sharp, warming, but it does little to ease the tension in his shoulders. He sets the glass down, the clink against the table a small deliberate sound in the quiet room. "It's not just the parcel," he begins, his voice gaining strength as he speaks. "It's what it contains, what it means. I'm a clerk, Mr. Holmes, at a small firm in the city. Nothing grand, just ledgers and contracts, the sort of work that keeps London's wheels turning. But 3 days ago, I was entrusted with this." He gestures to the parcel, its twine frayed slightly at the edges, as if handled too often. "It was given to me by my employer, Mr. Harrow, with strict instructions to deliver it to a man I'd never met. No name, no address, just a time and a place, a street corner in Whitechapel, tomorrow night." Watson, now seated across from Carver, leans forward, his brow furrowing. The firelight catches the faint scars on his knuckles, remnants of a life less gentle than this moment suggests. "Whitechapel," he says, his tone tinged with concern. "That's no place for a late-night errand, Mr. Carver. The papers are full of grim tales from those streets." He glances at Holmes, whose expression remains impassive, though his eyes flicker with interest at the mention of Whitechapel, a place where shadows hold more than just darkness. Holmes steps closer, his movements deliberate, like a cat circling its prey. He kneels before Carver, his gaze fixed on the parcel. "May I?" he asks, though it's less a question than a command. Carver hesitates, then hands it over, his fingers lingering as if reluctant to let go. Holmes turns the parcel in his hands, his touch light but precise, as if he's reading its surface like a map. The paper is coarse, slightly damp from the rain, and the twine is knotted with an unusual precision. A sailor's knot, perhaps, or something more obscure. "Heavy for its size," Holmes murmurs, almost to himself. "Not books, nor papers alone. Something metallic, perhaps, or densely packed. And the wrapping. Common butcher's paper, but the twine is of a finer make, imported, likely from the continent. Curious." Carver watches, his breath catching slightly. "I haven't opened it," he says quickly. "I was told not to. Mr. Harrow was insistent. He said it was of utmost importance that lives depended on it. But when I asked questions, he grew angry, told me to do my job and nothing more. I've worked for him for 5 years, Mr. Holmes, and I've never seen him like that. Pale, sweating, his hand shaking as he handed it to me." Holmes sets the parcel on the table, his fingers lingering on the twine for a moment longer. "And yet you didn't deliver it as instructed," he says, his voice soft but piercing. "You're here instead, risking your employer's wrath. Why?" Carver's eyes drop to the floor where the rug's faded patterns seem to hold his attention. The room is warm, but a chill seems to settle over him, as if the weight of his story is a cold hand on his shoulder. "Because of what happened afterward," he says, his voice barely above a whisper. "The next day Mr. Harrow didn't come to the office. His desk was empty, his coat gone from the rack. No one's seen him since. And then last night, I was followed. A man in a dark coat, his face hidden by a scarf. He kept his distance, but I felt his eyes on me, all the way from the office to my lodgings. I didn't sleep, Mr. Holmes. I couldn't. And this morning, I knew I had to come to you. Can you imagine the weight of that, dear listener? To carry a secret you don't understand, to feel the city's eyes on you, watching from every shadowed alley. Picture yourself in Carver's place, the parcel in your hands, its contents a mystery that pulls at your thoughts like a tide. The London of 1888 is not a kind place. It's a city of flickering gaslight and narrow streets, where survival means keeping your wits as sharp as a blade. The air smells of coal and damp stone, the sounds of hoofbeats and distant shouts echoing through the fog. What would you do, holding something that could mean life or death, with no one to trust but a detective whose mind is as brilliant as it is relentless? Watson shifts in his chair, the wood creaking softly under him. He glances at Holmes, who has returned to the parcel, his fingers tracing the edges as if they might whisper their secrets. "It sounds like trouble, Holmes," Watson says, his voice steady but laced with the caution of a man who's seen too much of the world's darker corners. "Whitechapel, a missing employer, a shadowed follower. This is no ordinary errand." Holmes's lips curve into the faintest of smiles, the kind that appears when a puzzle begins to take shape. No, Watson, it is not, and that is precisely why it interests me. He straightens, his eyes gleaming with that peculiar light that Watson knows all too well, the spark of a mind fully engaged, a hunter on the scent. Mr. Carver, describe this man who followed you, every detail, no matter how small, the tilt of his hat, the sound of his step, the way he moved. Carver frowns, his fingers twisting together in his lap. The brandy glass sits forgotten now, its contents barely touched. It was dark, he says, and the fog was thick. But he was tall, I think, taller than me. His coat was long, black, and he walked with a limp. Not heavy, but noticeable, like a man who's been injured and learned to hide it. His scarf was red, bright, the only colour I could make out. And his boots, they made a sharp sound like they were new, not worn like most in the city. Holmes nods, his gaze distant, as if he's already piecing together a picture from these fragments. And your employer, Mr. Harrow, what manner of man is he? His habits, his demeanour, his associates. Carver hesitates, his eyes flicking to the parcel, then back to Holmes. He's private, a man of routine, always at the office by 8, always the last to leave. He deals in contracts, mostly for shipping firms, but he keeps his own counsel. I've never seen him with friends, only clients, and even then he's curt. Respectable, though, always dressed well, always precise. But these last few weeks he's been different. Distracted, nervous. He'd lock his office door when he thought no one was watching, and once I heard him muttering to himself. Something about debts and just no way out. Watson leans back, his fingers brushing the armrest. The fabric worn smooth by years of use. The room feels smaller now, as if the weight of Carver's story has drawn the walls closer. He can almost taste the tension in the air, sharp and metallic, like the tang of blood. Sounds like a man in over his head, he says quietly. Debts can drive a man to desperate measures. Holmes's eyes flick to Watson, a silent acknowledgement of his friend's insight before returning to Carver. And this parcel, he says, his voice low, almost hypnotic. You've not looked inside, yet you suspect it holds something dangerous. Why? Carver swallows, his throat working visibly. Because of how he gave it to me. He looked, I'm afraid, not of me, but of what he was doing. He said, "Don't let it out of your sight, Edward. Not for a moment." And the way he said my name, it wasn't like him. It was personal, like he was pleading. Holmes picks up the parcel again, turning it slowly in his hands. The firelight catches the edges of the paper, casting faint shadows that dance across his face. Then let us see what secrets it holds, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. He reaches for the letter opener, its blade glinting as he slides it under the twine. The knot gives way with a soft snap, and the paper falls open, revealing a small wooden box, its surface plain but polished, with a faint carving on the lid. A symbol, perhaps, though too worn to decipher in the dim light. Watson leans forward, his breath catching. "Careful, Holmes," he murmurs, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver he keeps in his pocket, a habit from darker days. The box feels like a presence in the room, its weight more than physical, as if it carries the secrets of a city that never sleeps. Holmes's fingers hover over the lid, his eyes locked on Carver's. "Are you certain you wish to know what lies within, Mr. Carver?" he asks, his voice soft but heavy with implication. Once a secret is revealed, it cannot be undone. Carver nods, his face pale but resolute. "I have to know," he says. "I can't carry this any longer." The lid creaks as Holmes lifts it, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Inside, nestled in a bed of coarse cloth, lies a small glinting object, a key, its surface etched with intricate patterns, unlike any Watson has ever seen. It's heavy, old, and unmistakably valuable, not for its material but for what it might unlock. Can you feel the shift, dear listener? The way a single object can change the course of a morning, a day, a life. Imagine standing in that room, the fire's warmth at your back, the scent of tobacco and rain in the air, and the weight of a mystery unfolding before you. What would you do, holding a key to an unknown lock in a city where every door hides a story? The narrative pauses here, not because the story ends, but because it gathers itself, like a breath before a plunge. Settle deeper into your dreams, let the firelight and the rain carry you, and rest assured that the tale of this quiet Sunday at 221 B Baker Street will weave onward, guiding you gently towards sleep. The fire at 221 B Baker Street burns low now, its embers casting a soft amber glow across the room, where shadows pool in the corners like ink. The air holds the faint bitterness of Sherlock Holmes's chemical vials, now pushed to the edge of the table, overshadowed by the small wooden box that sits open before him. The key within, its intricate etchings glinting in the firelight, seems to hum with a quiet menace, as if it carries the weight of secrets yet unspoken. Outside, the rain has softened to a drizzle, a gentle patter against the windows blending with the distant creak of a cartwheel on Baker Street's cobblestones. The city breathes, its pulse slow but relentless, a reminder that even on a Sunday, London never truly rests. Dr. Watson sits forward, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed on the key. The warmth of the room presses against his skin, but there's a chill in his spine, a soldier's instinct that trouble is near. The scent of brandy lingers in the air, faint now as Edward Carver, their visitor, grips the arms of his chair, his knuckles pale against the dark wood. His face, lit by the fire, is a map of worry. His breath uneven as he watches Holmes, who holds the key between his fingers, turning it slowly as if it might speak. Sherlock Holmes's eyes are narrow, his expression one of fierce concentration, though his voice, when he speaks, is soft, almost soothing, like a lullaby woven with steel. "A key, Mr. Carver," he says, his words measured, deliberate, "but not to any common lock. The craftsmanship is old, likely pre-Victorian, and the etchings, see here, the faint spiral pattern, suggest a lock of some complexity, perhaps a safe or a mechanism of particular significance. Yet you were told to deliver it to a stranger in Whitechapel, under cover of night. Tell me, what did your employer say of this meeting? Every word, every gesture." Carver swallows, his throat working visibly. The fire pops, sending a spark skittering across the hearth, and he flinches as if the sound were a gunshot. "Mr. Harrow was vague," he says, his voice low, trembling at the edges. "He said only that I was to meet a man at the corner of Dorset Street and Commercial Road at midnight tomorrow. He described him, tall, thin, with a scar across his left cheek. I was to hand over the parcel and walk away, no questions, no lingering. But his eyes, Mr. Holmes, they were wild, like a man who'd seen something he couldn't unsee. He kept looking over his shoulder, as if someone were watching, even in his own office." Watson shifts, the chair creaking beneath him, the sound grounding in its familiarity. He can still taste the faint bitterness of his earlier tea, now cold in the cup beside him, and the scent of wet wool from Carver's coat lingers, a reminder of the city's damp embrace. "Dorset Street," he murmurs, his voice heavy with unease. "That's the heart of Whitechapel, Holmes, a place where men don't linger unless they're desperate or dangerous." His fingers brush the edge of his waistcoat where the weight of his revolver rests, a silent reassurance. Holmes sets the key back in its box, his movements precise, almost reverent. He leans back, steepling his fingers, his eyes half closed as if he's listening to a melody only he can hear. "Desperate men make poor choices, Watson," he says, his voice a low hum, "and dangerous men make careful ones. Mr. Harrow's behaviour suggests the former, but this key speaks of calculation, of intent. A man does not entrust such an object to a clerk without reason, nor does he vanish without trace unless the stakes are high." He pauses, his gaze flicking to Carver. "You said you were followed. Have you seen this man with the scar before?" Carver shakes his head, his fingers twisting together, the skin red from the pressure. "No, never. But last night, when I felt that man behind me, I thought of Mr. Harrow's description. The height, the way he moved. It could have been him. I didn't dare look too closely. I just kept walking faster and faster until I reached my lodgings and bolted the door. His voice breaks, and he looks down, as if ashamed of his fear. The room feels smaller now, the air thick with the weight of his words. Can you imagine it, dear listener? The fog of Whitechapel curling around you, the gas lamps casting their feeble glow, the sound of your own footsteps echoing on the wet cobblestones. Picture the prickle at the back of your neck, the certainty that someone watches from the shadows, their intent unknown. In 1888, London was a city of secrets, where every alley held a story, every stranger a threat. The air would have smelled of coal and decay, the taste of fear sharp on your tongue, the touch of damp air clinging to your skin. What would you have done? Carrying a key that could unlock a mystery or a nightmare? Holmes rises, his movements fluid, and crosses to the window. He pulls back the curtain, letting the pale light of the morning spill in, though it does little to dispel the gloom. The street below is quiet, save for a boy sweeping the pavement, his broom scraping rhythmically against the stones. Holmes's eyes scan the scene, searching for something or someone out of place. "You've done well to come here, Mr. Carver," he says without turning, "but you've also brought danger to my door. That man who followed you, he may be watching even now. Watson, would you be so kind as to check the street?" Watson nods, rising with a soldier's readiness, though his limp is more pronounced now, the damp weather tugging at old wounds. He steps to the window, his breath fogging the glass as he peers out. The street is empty, save for the boy and a stray dog nosing through a pile of refuse. The air smells of wet stone and the faint acrid tang of the city's ever-present smoke. Nothing out of the ordinary, he says, but his hand remains near his pocket, the revolver a quiet comfort. Holmes turns back to Carver, his expression unreadable, but his eyes are light with that peculiar intensity that Watson knows so well. "Tell me about your employer's office," he says. "The layout, the habits, the visitors, anything unusual in the days before he gave you the parcel." Carver frowns, his fingers brushing the edge of the box as if grounding himself in its presence. It's a small office, just off Threadneedle Street. 3 rooms, Mr. Harrow's private office, the clerk's room where I work, and a storage room for files. It's unremarkable. Ledgers, contracts, the usual business of shipping and trade. But in the last week or so, there were visitors, men I didn't recognise. One came late, after hours, always wearing a heavy coat, his hat pulled low. He'd go straight to Mr. Harrow's office, and they'd talk behind closed doors. I couldn't hear much, but once I caught a word, debt, again, and something about a ship, the Erindor. I thought it was just business, but Mr. Harrow was different after those visits, jumpy, distracted, like a man waiting for bad news. Holmes's eyes narrow, and Watson knows that look, the moment when a single detail sparks a cascade of connections in that brilliant mind. The Erindor, Holmes murmurs, almost to himself, a merchant ship docked at the East India Docks, if memory serves. Interesting. He moves to his desk, cluttered with papers and a half-disassembled microscope, and begins rifling through a stack of notes, his fingers moving with the precision of a pianist. "Watson, do you recall the case of the smuggler's cipher last spring? There was mention of a ship, was there not, involved in certain unorthodox transactions?" Watson nods, his memory stirring. "Yes, the Erindor was named in passing, though we never pursued it. Something about irregular manifests, wasn't it?" He glances at Carver, whose confusion is plain, and offers a reassuring smile. "Don't mind us, Mr. Carver. Holmes has a way of seeing patterns where others see only chaos." Holmes pulls a sheet of paper from the pile, his eyes scanning it quickly. "Indeed, and chaos, Watson, is merely a puzzle waiting to be solved. Mr. Carver, this key, this ship, your employer's disappearance, they are threads in a larger tapestry. I will need to see your office, and soon. But first, we must ensure your safety. You'll stay here tonight, under our protection. Watson, would you ask Mrs. Hudson to prepare the spare room?" Watson nods, rising once more, the familiar ache in his shoulder a quiet reminder of battles past. As he moves to the door, he pauses, glancing back at the key, still resting in its box. It's a small thing, yet it feels like the centre of the room, drawing all eyes to its silent promise. "Holmes," he says quietly, "if this key is what I think it is, we're stepping into something far bigger than a missing clerk." Holmes's lips twitch. Not quite a smile, but close enough to betray his excitement. "Precisely, Watson. And that is what makes it worth pursuing." He turns to Carver, his voice softening, though it carries an edge of command. "Rest now, Mr. Carver. You've carried this burden long enough. Leave it to me." Carver nods, his shoulders sagging as if a weight has been lifted, though his eyes still hold a flicker of fear. The fire crackles, the rain whispers, and the room settles into a fragile calm, the kind that precedes a storm. Watson steps into the hall, his boots echoing on the wooden floor, and calls for Mrs. Hudson, her familiar tread soon answering from below. Can you feel it, dear listener? The way a single key can shift the air, turning a quiet Sunday into a prelude to something vast and shadowed. Imagine standing in that room, the scent of tobacco and brandy mingling with the damp breath of the city outside, the touch of worn leather under your fingers, the sound of rain, a soft lullaby. What would you do caught in the orbit of a man like Sherlock Holmes, where every detail is a clue, every moment a step toward the unknown? The story breathes here, pausing like a dreamer on the edge of sleep, its threads woven but not yet complete. Settle deeper into your blankets, let the firelight and the rain carry you, and trust that the tale of this Sunday at 221B Baker Street will unfold further, guiding you gently toward dreams. The air in 221B Baker Street grows heavier now, as if the weight of Edward Carver's story has thickened the room's atmosphere, pressing against the walls. The fire has dwindled to a soft glow, its embers pulsing like a heartbeat, casting fleeting shadows across the cluttered shelves and the small wooden box on the table. That key, with its intricate etchings, lies silent but potent, a riddle wrapped in metal, glinting faintly in the dim light. Outside, the rain has ceased, leaving behind a damp stillness, broken only by the occasional clatter of a passing carriage or the faint cry of a street vendor, his voice muffled by the fog that clings to London streets. The city holds its breath, and within these walls the quiet Sunday morning has unravelled into something far more intricate. Dr. Watson returns from the hall, the faint creak of the floorboards announcing his presence before he speaks. His face is set, his eyes carrying the weight of a man who knows the calm is temporary. The scent of Mrs. Hudson's baking, warm bread perhaps with a hint of yeast, drifts up from the kitchen below, a comforting contrast to the tension in the room. Watson's hand brushes the doorframe, the wood smooth under his touch, worn by years of comings and goings. "Mrs. Hudson's preparing the spare room," he says, his voice steady but low, as if unwilling to disturb the fragile quiet. "She's none too pleased about unexpected guests, Holmes, but she'll manage." Sherlock Holmes stands by the window, his silhouette sharp against the pale light filtering through the fog. His fingers rest lightly on the curtain, the fabric coarse under his touch, and his eyes scan the street below, searching for any sign of the shadowed figure Carver described. The air carries the faint tang of coal smoke from the city beyond, mingling with the lingering scent of his pipe now cold in its stand. "Good," he murmurs, his voice a quiet blade cutting through the stillness. "Mr. Carver, you'll be safe here tonight, but safety is a fleeting thing in a city like this. We must act swiftly." Edward Carver sits hunched in his chair, his hands clasped tightly, the knuckles white as bone. The brandy glass beside him is untouched now, its amber contents reflecting the fire's faint glow. His coat, still damp, hangs over the back of the chair, the wool giving off a faint musty smell that blends with the room's other scents. Old books, chemical residue, the sharp bite of ink. "What do we do now, Mr. Holmes?" he asks, his voice trembling, though there's a thread of resolve in it, as if the act of speaking has steadied him. "This key, this meeting in Whitechapel, I don't understand what I've stumbled into." Holmes turns from the window, his eyes gleaming with that restless energy Watson knows so well, the kind that surfaces when a mystery begins to take shape. He crosses to the table, his movements fluid, almost silent, and picks up the key once more. Its weight is surprising for its size, and he holds it to the light, studying the etchings with the intensity of a scholar deciphering an ancient text. "Nor do I, Mr. Carver," he says, his tone soft but laced with a quiet thrill. "Not yet. But understanding is merely a matter of observation and deduction. This key is no ordinary trinket. It's a piece of a larger machine, a cog in a mechanism we have yet to uncover. The errand door, your employer's disappearance, the man who followed you, these are not separate events but parts of a single narrative." Watson settles into his chair, the familiar creak of the wood a small comfort. He leans forward, his elbows on his knees, the faint ache in his shoulder a reminder of the day's damp chill. "You're thinking of smuggling, aren't you?" he says, his voice low, thoughtful. "The errand door, those irregular manifests we heard about last year. And Whitechapel's a perfect place to move goods no one wants seen. But a key? What could it unlock that's worth all this secrecy?" Holmes's lips twitch, a shadow of a smile. "Precisely the question, Watson, and one we shall answer before this night is through." He sets the key down and moves to his desk, where a small brass lamp casts a warm circle of light. He pulls a notebook from the chaos of papers, its pages filled with his meticulous scrawl, and begins to write, his pen scratching softly against the paper. "Mr. Carver, describe the storage room in your office. Every detail, shelves, contents, locks, anything out of place." Carver frowns, his fingers brushing the armrest, the fabric worn but soft under his touch. The fire's warmth is fading, and he pulls his coat closer, as if to ward off the chill of memory. "It's a small room," he says, "crowded with filing cabinets and crates, old contracts mostly, and shipping records going back years. There's a safe in the corner, heavy, with a combination lock. Mr. Harrow used it for important documents, though I've never seen inside. The room's always locked, and only he has the key, or had it, I suppose. But last week, I noticed something odd. One of the crates was new, not like the others. It was smaller, made of dark wood, and it had a strange lock, not like anything I'd seen before. I thought it was just new stock, but now..." Holmes's pen pauses, his eyes narrowing. "A strange lock," he repeats, his voice almost a whisper. "Describe it." Carver hesitates, his brow furrowing as he tries to recall. It was small, circular, with carvings around the edge, spirals like on the key. I only saw it for a moment when I was fetching a file. Mr. Harrow came in and shut the door quickly, telling me to mind my own business. Holmes exchanges a glance with Watson, a silent conversation passing between them. Watson's hand twitches, as if reaching for the revolver he keeps close, and he leans back, his eyes fixed on the key. "Sounds like our key might fit that lock," he says, his voice steady but heavy with implication. "And if it does, what's inside the crate could explain why Harrow's gone missing, and why Carver's being followed." Holmes nods, his fingers drumming a soft rhythm on the desk. "Indeed. But we must see this crate for ourselves. Mr. Carver, you'll accompany us to your office tonight. The cover of darkness will serve us well." He rises, moving to the coat rack where his greatcoat hangs, its fabric heavy with the scent of London streets, damp wool, coal dust, and a faint trace of tobacco. "Watson, bring your revolver. I suspect we'll need more than a deduction before this is over." Watson stands, his movements deliberate, the soldier in him rising to the surface. He checks his revolver, the metal cool and familiar in his hand, and slips it into his pocket. The air feels charged now, the quiet of the morning giving way to the pulse of anticipation. "You're sure about this, Holmes?" he asks, though he already knows the answer. "Whitechapel at night is no place for a stroll." Holmes's eyes gleam, a spark of mischief in their depths. "Nor is it a place for cowardice, Watson. We've faced worse than shadows in the fog." He turns to Carver, who looks smaller now as if the weight of the mystery has pressed him into the chair. "Stay close, Mr. Carver, and tell no one of this. Not a word, not a glance. Your life may depend on it." Can you feel the shift, dear listener? The way a quiet morning can spiral into a night of secrets, where every step into the fog carries the weight of the unknown. Imagine yourself in their place. The cool metal of a key in your hand, the damp air of London against your skin, the faint taste of coal dust on your lips. The city is alive around you. It sounds. Hoofbeats, distant shouts, the creak of a shutter, blending into a symphony of suspense. What would you do standing on the edge of a mystery with a man like Sherlock Holmes leading the way? They leave the warmth of 221B behind, stepping into the hall, where the air is cooler, scented with the faint mustiness of old wood and the lingering warmth of Mrs. Hudson's kitchen. The stairs creak under their weight, each step a descent into the unknown. Outside, the fog has thickened, wrapping Baker Street in a shroud that muffles sound and blurs the edges of the world. Holmes pulls his coat tighter, his scarf a dark slash against the pale mist, and Watson follows, his hand never far from his pocket. Carver trails behind, his steps hesitant, the parcel no longer in his hands, but its weight still heavy on his shoulders. The street is quiet, save for the soft drip of water from the eaves and the occasional scuff of a boot on the cobblestones. The gas lamps cast pools of light, their glow struggling against the fog, and the air smells of wet stone and the faint, acrid bite of the city's breath. They move quickly, their footsteps echoing in the stillness toward the heart of London, where answers, and perhaps danger, await. The story pauses here, dear listener, not because it ends, but because it gathers strength, like a river before a fall. Let the fog and the firelight linger in your mind, wrap yourself in the quiet of this moment, and trust that the tale of this Sunday at 221B Baker Street will carry you forward, softly toward dreams. The fog of London wraps around Sherlock Holmes, Doctor. Watson and Edward Carver like a living thing, its damp tendrils curling through the narrow streets as they move away from the warmth of 221B Baker Street. The air is thick with the scent of wet cobblestones, coal smoke, and the faint sour tang of the Thames carried on the evening breeze. The gas lamps along Baker Street cast feeble halos, their light swallowed by the mist and the sounds of the city, a distant shout, the creak of a cartwheel, the soft splash of a puddle underfoot, seem muffled as if the world itself is holding its breath. It's no longer the quiet Sunday morning it once was. The day has tipped into dusk, and with it, the promise of answers grows sharper, heavier, like the weight of the key now tucked into Holmes's pocket. Holmes leads the way, his greatcoat a dark silhouette against the fog, his steps swift but silent, as if he's part of the city's shadows. His scarf, loosely knotted, brushes against his chin, the wool damp from the air, and his eyes scan the street with a predator's focus, noting every detail, the slant of a shutter, the flicker of a curtain, the scuff of mud on the pavement. Watson follows close behind, his hand resting near the revolver in his pocket, the metal cool and reassuring under his fingers. The ache in his shoulder, a relic of Afghanistan, pulses with the damp, but his stride is steady, his senses alert. Carver trails at the rear, his coat pulled tight, his breath uneven, each step a struggle against the fear that clings to him like the fog. The streets grow narrower as they move toward the city, the brick houses giving way to taller, grimmer buildings, their windows dark or shuttered. The air smells sharper here, of tar and refuse, with the faint sweetness of rotting fruit from a nearby market stall, long since abandoned for the day. The cobblestones are slick underfoot, and Watson feels the damp seep through the soles of his boots, a cold reminder of the city's unyielding nature. This is not the London of grand carriages and polished society, but the London of toil, where every day is a negotiation with survival, where the fog hides both dreams and dangers. Can you imagine it, dear listener? Walking these streets, the fog pressing against your skin, the air heavy with the city's breath. Picture the chill of the evening sinking into your bones, the faint taste of soot on your tongue, the sound of your own heartbeat mingling with the distant clatter of hooves. What would you feel caught in the orbit of a man like Sherlock Holmes, where every shadow holds a clue, every sound a story? This was London in 1888, a city of contrasts, where beauty and hardship danced a delicate waltz, where a single key could unlock a world of secrets. Holmes pauses at a corner, his hand raised to signal silence. The street is quiet, save for the soft drip of water from a nearby awning, but his eyes narrow, as if he senses something Watson and Carver cannot. "We're being watched," he murmurs, his voice so low it's almost lost in the fog. "Not followed, not yet, but watched. Stay close." Watson's grip tightens on his revolver, his eyes scanning the street. The fog blurs the edges of the world, making every shape uncertain. A lamppost could be a man, a shadow, a threat. "Where?" he whispers, his breath clouding in the cold air. Holmes tilts his head, his gaze fixed on a darkened alley across the street. "There," he says, his voice calm but certain. A man standing just beyond the light. He's still too long to be a passerby. "Carver, do you recognize the silhouette?" Carver peers into the fog, his face pale, his hands trembling as he clutches his coat. I can't be sure," he stammers. "It's too dark. But the height, the way he stands, it could be the man from last night, the one with the red scarf." Holmes nods, his expression unreadable. Then we proceed with caution. The office is not far. Threadneedle Street is just ahead. Keep your wits about you, both of you. He moves forward, his steps deliberate, as if daring the watcher to reveal himself. Watson follows, his heart steady but his senses sharp, the soldier in him awake to the possibility of danger. Carver hesitates, then hurries to keep pace, his boots slipping slightly on the wet stones. The office, when they reach it, is a narrow building squeezed between two larger ones, its brick facade stained with soot and time. The sign above the door reads, "Harrow & Sons, Shipping Agents." Though the paint is peeling, the letters faded. The air here smells of ink and dust, with a faint metallic tang that Watson can't quite place. Perhaps the nearby ironworks, or something less innocent. Holmes tests the door, finding it locked, and produces a small set of tools from his pocket, their metal glinting faintly in the gaslight. "A simple lock," he murmurs, almost to himself as he works. "Child's play." The lock clicks open, and the door swings inward with a soft creak, revealing a dark hallway. The air inside is stale, heavy with the scent of old paper and wax and the faint acrid bite of something chemical, perhaps spilled ink or a cleaning agent. Watson steps inside, his hand still near his revolver, his eyes adjusting to the dimness. The floorboards groan under their weight, and Carver flinches, his breath catching. "It's never this quiet," he whispers. "Even at night there's always some sound, clerks working late, the street outside. But now, it's like the place is holding its breath." Holmes moves ahead, his steps silent, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Fear makes the world quieter, Mr. Carver," he says, his voice low, almost soothing. "But it also makes it louder, if you know how to listen." He pauses at a door marked "Clerk's Room," pushing it open to reveal a cramped space filled with desks, each buried under stacks of ledgers and papers. The air smells of dust and ink, with a faint trace of tobacco, someone's secret vice, perhaps. A single gas lamp hangs from the ceiling, unlit, its brass fittings tarnished. "Show me the storage room," Holmes says, turning to Carver, who nods and leads them to a door at the far end of the room. The key in his hand, not the mysterious one, but a plain iron one, trembles slightly as he unlocks the door. It opens with a groan, revealing a small, crowded space lined with filing cabinets and crates. The air is colder here, damp, with a faint mustiness that speaks of long-neglected records. The wooden crate Carver describes sits in the corner, its dark surface standing out against the faded boxes around it. Its lock, small and circular, gleams faintly, the spiral etchings catching what little light filters through a high, narrow window. Holmes kneels before the crate, his fingers brushing the lock, his touch almost reverent. "Identical to the key's pattern," he murmurs, producing the key from his pocket. Its metal feels heavy, cold, and he holds it to the lock, testing the fit. It slides in with a soft click, and the mechanism turns, smooth and precise, as if it were made for this moment. Watson leans closer, his breath held, the faint scent of his own sweat mingling with the room's mustiness. Carver stands back, his eyes wide, his hands clenched into fists. The crate opens to reveal a tightly packed bundle of papers, bound with twine, and a small leather pouch, its surface worn but sturdy. Holmes lifts the pouch, his fingers deft, and loosens the drawstring to reveal a collection of small, glinting objects. Coins, perhaps, or medallions, each engraved with the same spiral pattern as the key. Not currency, Holmes says, his voice low, almost a whisper. Tokens, perhaps, or markers. A private system, used by those who wish to remain unseen. He sets the pouch aside and unties the papers, scanning them quickly. Shipping manifests, but altered. Dates changed. Cargoes listed as grain, but marked with symbols that suggest something else entirely. Opium, perhaps, or worse. Watson's brow furrows, his hand still near his revolver. Smuggling, then, he says, his voice heavy. And Harrow was in deep. But why the key? Why not just deliver the papers? Holmes's eyes gleam, a spark of triumph in their depths. Because the key is the proof, Watson. The papers are evidence, but the key, its lock, its tokens, ties this to something larger. A network, perhaps, operating in the shadows of London's docks. The Erindor is no mere merchant ship, and Mr. Harrow's disappearance is no coincidence. He turns to Carver, who looks as if he might collapse under the weight of the revelation. You were meant to deliver this key to someone who expected it, someone who would know its value. But your employer's fear suggests he crossed them, or tried to. Carver shakes his head, his voice barely audible. I didn't know, he says. I just did what I was told. I'm no one, Mr. Holmes, a clerk, nothing more. Holmes's expression softens, though his eyes remain sharp. No one is no one, Mr. Carver. You've carried a piece of this puzzle, and that makes you vital. He closes the crate, locking it once more, and slips the key into his pocket. We take the papers and the pouch. The crate stays. It's too heavy to move discreetly. We'll return to Baker Street, and a sound cuts him off. A sharp, deliberate scuff of boots outside the office door. Watson's hand flies to his revolver, his body tensing, the soldier in him awake. Holmes raises a hand, signalling silence, and moves to the door, his steps silent as a cat's. He peers through the crack, his eyes narrowing. Our watcher has grown bold, he whispers. Tall, limping, red scarf. He's alone for now. Watson's heart pounds, the air suddenly sharp with the taste of adrenaline. What's the plan, Holmes? He asks, his voice low, steady despite the tension. Holmes's lips curve into a faint smile, the kind that appears when the game is truly afoot. We confront him, he says. But not here. The street offers better ground. Carver, stay behind us. Watson, be ready. They move as one, slipping out of the storage room and through the clerk's room, the air growing colder as they approach the outer door. The fog outside is thicker now, a wall of grey that swallows the street. The gas lamps mere pinpricks of light. Holmes steps into the night, his coat blending with the shadows, and Watson follows, his revolver drawn but held low. Carver stumbles behind, his breath ragged, the pouch and papers clutched to his chest. The man with the red scarf stands across the street, his silhouette barely visible in the fog. His limp is noticeable now, a slight hitch in his step as he turns to face them. His scarf, bright against the gloom, is the only clear detail, a slash of colour in the monochrome world. You have something that doesn't belong to you, he calls, his voice low with a faint accent Watson can't place. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt. Holmes steps forward, his voice calm but cutting. And you, sir, have been following a man who sought my help. Tell me, what is the key worth to you, and what is Erindor hiding? The man stiffens, his hand moving to his coat, and Watson raises his revolver, the metal cold against his palm. Don't, he warns, his voice steady, the soldier's calm settling over him. The fog swirls, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and danger, and for a moment the world narrows to this single confrontation. Can you feel it, dear listener? The pulse of the city around you, the weight of a mystery in your hands, the chill of the fog against your face. Imagine standing there, the taste of fear and resolve on your tongue, the sound of your own breath loud in your ears. What would you do facing a shadow in the night, with Sherlock Holmes at your side? The story holds its breath here, dear listener, gathering its strength like a wave before it crashes. Let the fog and the gaslight linger in your mind, wrap yourself in the quiet tension of this moment, and trust that the tale of this Sunday at 221B Baker Street will unfold further, carrying you gently toward dreams. The fog of London clings to the street like a shroud, its damp fingers curling around Sherlock Holmes' doctor. Watson and Edward Carver as they stand frozen, facing the man with the red scarf. The air is heavy with the scent of wet stone and coal, the faint metallic tang of the city's underbelly cutting through the mist. The gas lamps flicker, their light struggling to pierce the gloom, casting the stranger's silhouette into sharp relief. A tall figure, his limp barely noticeable now, his scarf a vivid slash of crimson against the grey. His voice, low and edged with a foreign lilt, hangs in the air, a challenge unanswered. Hand it over, and no one gets hurt. Holmes stands motionless, his greatcoat blending with the shadows, his eyes locked on the man's obscured face. His fingers, tucked into his pocket, brush the cold metal of the key, its intricate etchings a silent promise of secrets yet to be unravelled. Watson, revolver in hand, holds his ground, the weapon steady despite the chill seeping through his coat, the damp fabric clinging to his shoulders. The taste of adrenaline is sharp on his tongue, mingling with the ever-present soot of the city, and his eyes dart between Holmes and the stranger, ready for the slightest movement. Carver, clutching the pouch and papers to his chest, trembles, his breath uneven, the weight of the moment pressing him into the cobblestones. The street is silent save for the soft drip of water from a nearby gutter and the distant clatter of a hansom cab, its wheels muffled by the fog. This is London at its rawest, a city of hidden corners and whispered threats, where survival demands a keen ear and a steady hand. The air feels alive, charged with the tension of a moment that could tip into violence or revelation. Can you picture it, dear listener? The fog wrapping around you, cold and clammy, the faint smell of tar and decay filling your lungs, the sound of your own heartbeat loud in the stillness. What would you do, standing in the shadow of a mystery, with a man like Sherlock Holmes leading the charge? Holmes's voice breaks the silence, calm but cutting, a blade sheathed in velvet. You speak of ownership, sir, but you've yet to prove your claim. The key, the papers, why do they matter so much that you would follow a clerk through the fog? And what is Erindor to you? His tone is almost conversational, but there's a weight to it, a challenge that dares the man to reveal more than he intends. The stranger shifts, his limp more pronounced now, as if the effort of standing still has worn him down. His hand hovers near his coat, and Watson's grip tightens on the revolver, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "You're meddling in things you don't understand, Mr. Holmes," the man says, his voice low, almost a growl. "The key isn't yours to keep, and neither are the papers. Give them to me and walk away. You don't want this fight." Holmes's lips curve into a faint smile, the kind that Watson knows signals danger. Not for Holmes, but for the man who thinks he can outwit him. "I never walk away from a puzzle," Holmes says, his voice soft, hypnotic. "And you, sir, are a piece of it. Your accent, Prussian perhaps, with a hint of the docks. Your limp suggests an injury, recent but not fresh, likely from a fall or a fight. And that scarf, too fine for a common thug, yet you wear it like a mask. Who are you hiding from? Not me, surely." The man stiffens, his hand twitching toward his coat, and Watson steps forward, his revolver raised. "Don't try it," he says, his voice steady, the soldier's calm settling over him like a second skin. The fog swirls around them, the air cold and damp carrying the faint scent of oil from the nearby lamps. "We're not here to play games. Answer him." For a moment, the world holds its breath, The man's eyes, barely visible beneath the brim of his hat, flicker with something. Anger, fear, calculation. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he raises his hands, palms open, as if to signal peace. "You're a clever man, Mr. Holmes," he says, his voice quieter now, almost resigned. "But cleverness won't protect you from what's coming. The key opens more than a crate. It opens a door to men who don't forgive. Keep it, and you'll regret it." Holmes steps closer, undeterred, his eyes gleaming with that relentless curiosity that drives him. "Then tell me about these men," he says. "Who are they? What do they want with the Erindor? And why does a shipping clerk's disappearance matter so much that you'd risk confronting me in the open?" The man hesitates, his scarf shifting slightly as he breathes, revealing a faint scar across his cheek, the mark Carver described. "Harrow was a fool," he says at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "He thought he could play both sides, take their money and keep their secrets. But secrets have a way of getting out, and when they do, men like me clean up the mess. The key, the papers, they're proof. Proof of a deal gone wrong, of cargo that never should have reached London's shores." Watson's brow furrows, his mind racing to piece together the fragments. "Cargo," he says, his voice low. "You mean opium, don't you? Or something worse. The Erindor's manifest were altered. Holmes saw it in the papers. What was Harrow smuggling, and for whom?" The man's eyes narrow, but he doesn't answer. Instead, he takes a step back, his limp more pronounced now, as if he's preparing to flee. Holmes moves faster, closing the distance in a single stride, his hand shooting out to grab the man's wrist. The stranger twists, surprisingly agile, and pulls free, his coat flapping as he turns and vanishes into the fog, his footsteps uneven but swift on the cobblestones. "After him!" Holmes snaps, already moving, his greatcoat billowing like a cloak. Watson follows, his boots pounding the pavement, the revolver still in hand. Carver stumbles behind, clutching the pouch and papers, his breath ragged as he struggles to keep up. The fog swallows the street, turning it into a maze of shadows and half-seen shapes. The air is cold, sharp, with the scent of damp earth and refuse, and Watson feels the strain in his lungs, the old wound in his shoulder throbbing with each step. They round a corner, the gas lamps casting fleeting light, and catch a glimpse of the red scarf ahead, a beacon in the gloom. Holmes is relentless, his long legs eating up the distance, his eyes fixed on the figure weaving through the fog. Watson pushes himself harder, ignoring the ache in his leg, the soldier's discipline driving him forward. "Holmes, we can't lose him," he calls, his voice muffled by the mist. Holmes doesn't respond, his focus absolute, but he slows as they reach a narrow alley, the walls looming close, slick with damp. The man's footsteps have stopped, the silence sudden and oppressive. Holmes raises a hand, signalling caution, and Watson draws closer, his revolver ready, the metal cold against his palm. Carver, panting, presses himself against the wall, the papers crinkling in his grip. "He's here," Holmes whispers, his voice barely audible. "Listen." The alley is quiet, but there's a faint sound, a soft scrape like a boot on stone or the rustle of fabric. Holmes moves forward, his steps silent, his eyes scanning the shadows. Watson follows, his heart pounding, the fog thick in his throat, tasting of coal and fear. They find the man at the end of the alley, backed against a wall, his scarf loosened now, revealing the scar across his cheek in full. His eyes are wild, but there's a resignation in them, as if he knows he's been caught. "You're persistent, Mr. Holmes," he says, his voice hoarse. "But you're too late. The Erindor sails tomorrow, and the key won't change that. You can't stop what's coming." Holmes steps closer, his presence commanding, his voice low and steady. "Then tell me what's coming," he says. "Who are you working for? What does the key unlock beyond the crate? Speak, and I may let you walk away." The man laughs, a sharp, bitter sound that echoes off the walls. "You think it's that simple? You think you can unravel this with your clever words and your friend's gun? The men I work for, they don't negotiate, they don't forgive. The key, the papers, they're a warning. Harrow learned that the hard way." Watson steps forward, his revolver trained on the man's chest. "Where is Harrow?" he demands, his voice hard now, the soldier's edge cutting through. If he's alive, tell us. If he's dead, tell us who did it. The man's eyes flicker to Watson, then back to Holmes, and for a moment it seems he might speak. But then from the mouth of the alley a new sound, a low whistle, sharp and deliberate, cutting through the fog. The man's face changes, fear replacing defiance, and he bolts, shoving past Holmes with surprising strength. Holmes lunges, but the man is quick, his limp forgotten as he disappears into the mist. Holmes curses under his breath, a rare lapse, and turns to Watson. "We've lost him," he says, his voice tight with frustration. "But not the trail. That whistle. Someone was signalling him. We're closer than they'd like." Watson lowers his revolver, his arm aching from the tension. "What now, Holmes?" he asks, his breath clouding in the cold air. "We have the key, the papers, the tokens, but we're no closer to Harrow or the truth." Holmes's eyes gleam, undeterred. "On the contrary, Watson. We have everything we need to find the errand door. The docks are our next move, but first we return to Baker Street. Carver needs rest, and I need to think." They retrace their steps, the fog thicker now, the city a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. Carver is silent, his face pale, the weight of the pouch and papers heavy in his hands. The air smells of damp wool and smoke, the cobblestones slick underfoot, and Watson feels the weight of the night settling over him, a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Back at 221B, the fire is nearly out, the room cold and quiet. Mrs. Hudson greets them with a tray of tea, the steam carrying the faint sweetness of chamomile, a small comfort against the night's chill. Holmes sits at his desk, the papers spread before him, his fingers tracing the altered manifests, his mind already piecing together the puzzle. Watson watches, his revolver now back in his pocket, the ache in his shoulder a quiet reminder of the night's exertions. Can you feel the pulse of this moment, dear listener? The warmth of the tea, the chill of the fog still clinging to your coat, the weight of a mystery that grows heavier with each step. Imagine sitting in that room, the fire's embers fading, the city's heartbeat echoing outside, and the promise of answers just out of reach. What would you do, caught in the web of Sherlock Holmes's mind, where every detail is a thread, every question a key? The tale pauses here, gathering its breath, ready to plunge deeper into the shadows of London's docks. Let the warmth of the room and the quiet of the night wrap around you, and trust that the story of this Sunday at 221B Baker Street will carry you forward, gently toward dreams. The embers in the hearth at 221B Baker Street glow faintly, their warmth barely holding back the chill that has crept into the room as night deepens over London. The air carries the soft sweetness of Mrs. Hudson's chamomile tea, now cooling in chipped porcelain cups, mingling with the lingering scents of pipe tobacco and the faint chemical tang of Sherlock Holmes's abandoned experiments. The papers from the mysterious crate lie spread across Holmes's desk, their edges curling slightly, the ink smudged by time and careless hands. The leather pouch, its tokens glinting like secrets in the lamplight, rests beside them, a silent challenge. Outside, the fog has settled into a heavy blanket, muffling the city's pulse. The distant clatter of hooves, the low murmur of a night watchman's call, the soft drip of water from the eaves. Dr. Watson sits in his armchair, his coat draped over the back, still damp from their venture into the fog. His fingers brush the worn fabric of the armrest, grounding him in the familiar, though his eyes are fixed on Holmes, who paces slowly before the desk, his movements deliberate, like a metronome keeping time with his thoughts. The key, that small, intricate piece of metal, rests in Holmes's hand, its etchings catching the light as he turns it over, studying it with an intensity that seems to draw the room's air into itself. Edward Carver, exhausted and pale, sits hunched on a stool near the fire, the pouch and papers now entrusted to Holmes's care. His hands tremble slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of a night that has spiralled far beyond his quiet clerk's life. The silence in the room is heavy, broken only by the soft creak of the floorboards under Holmes's boots and the occasional pop of the dying fire. Watson leans forward, his voice low, steady, the soldier's calm still holding, despite the ache in his shoulder and the unease in his gut. "Holmes," he says, "that man in the alley, he knew more than he let on. The errand door, the key, Harrow's disappearance, it's all connected, isn't it? But what are we walking into? A smuggling ring? Something worse?" Holmes pauses, his fingers stilling on the key, his eyes distant, as if seeing beyond the walls of Baker Street. "Worse, Watson," he murmurs, his voice soft but laced with a quiet thrill. "Smuggling is a petty crime, a game for small minds. This is something larger. The tokens, the altered manifests, the key's craftsmanship, they suggest a network, organised and ruthless, operating in the shadows of London's docks. The errand door is not just a ship, it's a conduit, a link in a chain that stretches far beyond Whitechapel." Carver shifts, his stool creaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Harrow never spoke of such things," he says, his eyes fixed on the fire, as if seeking answers in its fading glow. "He was a careful man, proper, but these last weeks, he was different, frightened. He'd lock his office door even when I was there, and once I saw him burn a letter in the grate, his hands shaking. I thought it was just business troubles, debts maybe. But now..." His voice trails off and he looks to Holmes, his face a map of fear and confusion. Holmes sets the key down, his movements precise, and picks up one of the manifests, his eyes scanning the scrawled notes and cryptic symbols. "Debts, yes," he says, "but not the kind paid in coins. Your employer, Mr. Carver, was entangled in something far more dangerous. A debt of loyalty, perhaps, or information. These papers..." He taps the manifest, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "List cargo as grain, but the quantities and dates are inconsistent, deliberately so. And these symbols, here and on the tokens, are not mere decoration. They're a code, a mark of belonging, used by those who trade in secrets as much as goods." Watson rises, crossing to the desk, his boots heavy on the rug. He leans over the papers, the faint smell of old ink and dust rising from them, and studies the symbols, a series of spirals and lines, deceptively simple yet unfamiliar. "A code," he says, his voice thoughtful. "Like the ciphers we've seen before, but this feels older, more deliberate. Could it be a secret society? One of those underground groups the papers whisper about?" Holmes's lips twitch, a shadow of a smile. "You're not far off, Watson. But societies, secret or otherwise, thrive on order, and this feels chaotic, desperate. The man in the alley, his warning about men who don't forgive, he spoke of power, not ideology. We're dealing with a syndicate, one that uses the errand door to move something valuable, something worth killing for." He turns to Carver, his eyes sharp, though his voice remains soft, almost soothing. "Mr. Carver, you mentioned a safe in Harrow's office. Describe it." Carver frowns, his fingers twisting together, the skin red from the pressure. The air in the room feels colder now, the fire's warmth fading, and he pulls his coat closer, the wool still carrying the damp scent of the fog. "It's a heavy thing," he says, "iron with a combination lock, about 3 feet high, set into the wall behind his desk. He kept important contracts in it," he said, "but I never saw inside. Only he had the combination, and he was careful, always checked the room was empty before opening it." Holmes nods, his fingers drumming a soft rhythm on the desk, the sound like a heartbeat in the stillness. "Then that safety is our next step. If Harrow was hiding something, it's there. We'll return to the office at first light. Discretion will serve us better than another night chase." He glances at Watson, a silent question in his eyes, and Watson nods, understanding the unspoken plan. "You're sure about this, Holmes?" Watson asks, his voice low, the weight of the night settling over him. "If this syndicate is as dangerous as you say, we're stirring a hornet's nest. And Carver, he's no soldier, he's in over his head." Holmes's gaze softens, though his resolve remains. He is Watson, but so are we all, in our way. The difference is we know how to navigate the storm. He turns to Carver, who looks small and fragile in the firelight. Rest now, Mr. Carver. You're safe here under our roof. Mrs. Hudson will show you to your room. Carver nods, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion, and rises, his movements slow, as if the weight of the night has settled into his bones. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps echo from the hall, her voice a soft murmur as she leads him away. The scent of chamomile trailing in her wake. The door closes behind them, leaving Holmes and Watson alone. The room quiet, save for the faint crackle of the fire and the distant hum of the city beyond. Watson sinks back into his chair, his hand brushing the revolver now resting on the side table, its metal cool and familiar. "This feels bigger than we expected, Holmes," he says, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. "That man in the alley, he wasn't just a hired thug. He knew you, knew your reputation, and that whistle. Someone else is out there watching." Holmes moves to the window, pulling back the curtain to reveal the fog-shrouded street below. The gas lamps glow faintly, their light swallowed by the mist, and the air carries the faint acrid bite of coal smoke. "Indeed, Watson," he says, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We've caught their attention, and that's precisely what I wanted. A syndicate thrives in the shadows, shine a light, and they scatter, or they strike. Either way, we'll have our answers." He turns back to the desk, picking up one of the tokens, its spiral pattern catching the lamplight. "These tokens," he says, "they're not mere markers. They're a currency of trust, a way to identify those within the syndicate. The errand door is their conduit, but the key, it's the heart of it. It unlocks something more than a crate, Watson. A safe, a vault, perhaps even a secret held by men who'd kill to keep it." Watson leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "Then we need to find that safe before they do. But Holmes, if they're watching us, they'll know we're coming. The docks, the office, it's a trap waiting for spring." Holmes's smile is sharp, a blade in the firelight. "Let it spring, Watson. A trap reveals as much as it conceals. We'll be ready." He sets the token down, his fingers lingering on its surface, and moves to his violin, resting in its open case. He picks it up, the wood smooth under his touch, and draws the bow across the strings, a single, mournful note filling the room, soft and haunting like the fog outside. The music weaves through the air, a gentle counterpoint to the tension, and Watson feels his shoulders relax, though his mind remains alert. The scent of the tea, the warmth of the fading fire, the weight of the revolver beside him, they ground him in this moment, a quiet pause before the storm. "You're playing to think," he says, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What's the plan, Holmes?" Holmes's bow pauses, the note lingering, and he turns, his eyes gleaming with that restless energy Watson knows so well. "At dawn, we go to the office. We open the safe, and we follow the trail to errand door. But tonight, Watson, we prepare. I'll need my files on the East India docks, and you, check your revolver. We may need it before this is over." Watson nods, rising to fetch the files from the cluttered shelves, the air thick with the smell of old leather and dust. He feels the weight of the night, the city's pulse echoing in his chest, and knows that this quiet Sunday has become something else entirely, a chase, a puzzle, a dance with danger. Describe it. Carver frowns, his fingers twisting together, the skin red from the pressure. The air in the room feels colder now, the fire's warmth fading, and he pulls his coat closer, the wool still carrying the damp scent of the fog. "It's a heavy thing," he says, "iron with a combination lock, about 3 feet high, set into the wall behind his desk. He kept important contracts in it," he said, "but I never saw inside. Only he had the combination, and he was careful. Always checked the room was empty before opening it." Holmes nods, his fingers drumming a soft rhythm on the desk, the sound like a heartbeat in the stillness. "Then that safety is our next step. If Harrow was hiding something, it's there. We'll return to the office at first light. Discretion will serve us better than another night chase." He glances at Watson, a silent question in his eyes, and Watson nods, understanding the unspoken plan. "You're sure about this, Holmes?" Watson asks, his voice low, the weight of the night settling over him. If this syndicate is as dangerous as you say, we're stirring a hornet's nest. And Carver, he's no soldier, he's in over his head. Holmes's gaze softens, though his resolve remains. He is Watson, but so are we all in our way. The difference is we know how to navigate the storm. He turns to Carver, who looks small and fragile in the firelight. Rest now, Mr. Carver. You're safe here under our roof. Mrs. Hudson will show you to your room. Carver nods, his shoulders sagging with exhaustion, and rises, his movements slow, as if the weight of the night has settled into his bones. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps echo from the hall, her voice a soft murmur as she leads him away. The scent of chamomile trailing in her wake. The door closes behind them, leaving Holmes and Watson alone. The room quiet, save for the faint crackle of the fire and the distant hum of the city beyond. Watson sinks back into his chair, his hand brushing the revolver now resting on the side table, its metal cool and familiar. "This feels bigger than we expected, Holmes," he says, his voice heavy with the weight of experience. "That man in the alley, he wasn't just a hired thug. He knew you, knew your reputation, and that whistle. Someone else is out there watching." Holmes moves to the window, pulling back the curtain to reveal the fog-shrouded street below. The gas lamps glow faintly, their light swallowed by the mist, and the air carries the faint acrid bite of coal smoke. "Indeed, Watson," he says, his voice low, almost a whisper. "We've caught their attention, and that's precisely what I wanted. A syndicate thrives in the shadows, shine a light, and they scatter, or they strike. Either way, we'll have our answers." He turns back to the desk, picking up one of the tokens, its spiral pattern catching the lamplight. "These tokens," he says, "they're not mere markers. They're a currency of trust, a way to identify those within the syndicate. The errand door is their conduit, but the key, it's the heart of it. It unlocks something more than a crate, Watson. A safe, a vault, perhaps even a secret held by men who'd kill to keep it." Watson leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "Then we need to find that safe before they do. But Holmes, if they're watching us, they'll know we're coming. The docks, the office, it's a trap waiting for spring." Holmes's smile is sharp, a blade in the firelight. "Let it spring, Watson. A trap reveals as much as it conceals. We'll be ready." He sets the token down, his fingers lingering on its surface, and moves to his violin, resting in its open case. He picks it up, the wood smooth under his touch, and draws the bow across the strings, a single, mournful note filling the room, soft and haunting like the fog outside. The music weaves through the air, a gentle counterpoint to the tension, and Watson feels his shoulders relax, though his mind remains alert. The scent of the tea, the warmth of the fading fire, the weight of the revolver beside him, they ground him in this moment, a quiet pause before the storm. "You're playing to think," he says, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What's the plan, Holmes?" Holmes's bow pauses, the note lingering, and he turns, his eyes gleaming with that restless energy Watson knows so well. "At dawn, we go to the office. We open the safe, and we follow the trail to errand door. But tonight, Watson, we prepare. I'll need my files on the East India docks, and you, check your revolver. We may need it before this is over." Watson nods, rising to fetch the files from the cluttered shelves, the air thick with the smell of old leather and dust. He feels the weight of the night, the city's pulse echoing in his chest, and knows that this quiet Sunday has become something else entirely, a chase, a puzzle, a dance with danger. Can you sense it, dear listener? The way the room holds its secrets, the violin's note lingering like a promise, the fog outside pressing against the windows. Picture yourself here, the taste of chamomile on your tongue, the feel of worn wood under your fingers, the city's heartbeat just beyond the walls. What would you do standing on the edge of a mystery with Sherlock Holmes's mind as your guide? The tale rests here, its threads drawn tight, ready to unravel further in the light of dawn. Let the music and the firelight wrap around you and drift gently toward dreams, knowing the story of this Sunday at 221 B. Baker Street will soon continue. The night has deepened over 221 B. Baker Street, and the room feels smaller now, as if the walls have drawn closer under the weight of the mystery unfolding within. The fire is little more than a glow, its embers casting a faint flickering light across the cluttered desk where Sherlock Holmes's papers lie scattered. Manifests, tokens, and cryptic notes that speak of secrets buried in London's underbelly. The air holds the faint, comforting scent of chamomile tea, now cold in its cups, mingling with the sharper notes of old ink, dust, and the ever-present trace of Holmes's pipe tobacco, its sweetness softened by the damp chill seeping through the window. Outside, the fog has thickened, a heavy curtain that muffles the city's sounds, the distant clop of hooves, the low murmur of a watchman's call, the soft drip of water from the eaves onto the cobblestones below. Sherlock Holmes stands by the desk, his violin now resting in its case, the mournful note it played still lingering in the air like a ghost. His fingers trace the edge of a manifest, the paper rough under his touch, as he studies the symbols scrawled in the margins, spirals and lines, a code that whispers of something vast and hidden. His greatcoat, still damp from their earlier venture, hangs on the rack, its wool carrying the faint scent of the city's fog and smoke. Dr. Watson sits nearby, his revolver cleaned and loaded, resting on the side table, its metal glinting in the lamplight. The ache in his shoulder is a quiet companion, a reminder of the night's exertions, but his eyes are sharp, fixed on Holmes, watching the familiar dance of his friend's mind. The room is quiet, save for the soft rustle of papers as Holmes sifts through them, his movements precise, almost reverent. Edward Carver is gone, tucked away in the spare room under Mrs. Hudson's care, his exhausted form finally succumbing to sleep. But the weight of his story remains, heavy as the key now tucked into Holmes's pocket, its intricate etchings a silent promise of answers or danger. Watson leans forward, his chair creaking softly, the sound grounding in its familiarity. "Holmes," he says, his voice low, steady, "you're sure about the docks? The Erindor sails tomorrow, and if that man in the alley was telling the truth, we're walking into a lion's den. We need more than papers and a key to face a syndicate." Holmes's eyes flicker to Watson, a spark of amusement in their depths, though his expression remains serious. "A lion's den, Watson, is precisely where the truth hides," he says, his voice soft but edged with steel. "The Erindor is the key to this puzzle, not the one in my pocket, but the ship itself. These manifests," he taps the papers, the sound sharp in the quiet room, "suggest cargo far beyond grain or opium. The tokens, the code, the secrecy, it points to something rare, something worth killing for, and Harrow's safe may hold the final piece." Watson's brow furrows, his fingers brushing the revolver, the metal cool under his touch. The air smells of dust and ink, with a faint trace of the chamomile that lingers like a memory of comfort. "You think the safe holds more than papers," he says, his voice thoughtful. "A ledger, maybe? Names, dates, proof of who's behind this?" Holmes nods, his fingers steepling as he leans back, the lamplight casting shadows across his sharp features. "Precisely. A man like Harrow, cautious but desperate, would keep a record, insurance perhaps, against those he feared. The safe is our next move, but we must be swift. The syndicate knows we have the key, and they'll be watching." He glances at the window where the fog presses against the glass, a grey veil that hides the world beyond. "We leave at dawn, the office, then the docks, and Watson. Keep that revolver close." Watson nods, his hand resting on the weapon, its weight a quiet reassurance. "I always do," he says, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But Holmes, what about Carver? He's no match for this. If we take him to the docks, he'll be a liability." Holmes's expression softens, though his eyes remain sharp. "He stays here, under Mrs. Hudson's watchful eye. He played his part, brought us the key, the papers. The rest is ours to unravel." He picks up a token, its spiral pattern catching the light, and turns it in his fingers as if it might speak. "These tokens," he murmurs almost to himself, "they're a mark of trust, a bond between men who trade in shadows. But trust is fragile, Watson, and this syndicate is cracking under its own weight. Harrow's disappearance, The man in the alley, they're signs of a system breaking down. The room falls silent, the air heavy with the weight of their words. Watson feels the city beyond the walls, its pulse faint but relentless, a reminder that London never truly sleeps. The fog outside is a living thing curling through the streets, carrying the sense of coal, damp stone and the faint sour bite of the Thames. Can you imagine it, dear listener? Sitting in this room, the lamplight warm against your skin, the taste of cold tea lingering on your tongue, the faint creak of the floorboards underfoot. Picture the weight of a mystery in your hands, the city's heartbeat echoing in your chest, the promise of danger just beyond the door. What would you do, caught in the quiet before the storm with Sherlock Holmes's mind as your guide? Holmes rises, crossing to the window, his boots silent on the rug. He pulls back the curtain, peering into the fog, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. The street below is empty, save for a lone cat slinking through the shadows, its eyes glinting in the gaslight. "They're out there," he says, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Watching, waiting. But they've underestimated us, Watson. They always do." Watson stands, stretching his shoulders, the ache of a familiar companion. He moves to the desk, picking up one of the manifests, his eyes tracing the cryptic symbols. "These codes," he says, "they're like nothing we've seen before. Not military, not Masonic. Something older, maybe. Could they be tied to the docks themselves? A guild, perhaps, or a smuggling ring with roots deeper than we thought?" Holmes turns, his eyes gleaming with that restless energy that surfaces when a puzzle begins to take shape. "A fine theory, Watson," he says, "and not far from the truth. The docks are London's lifeblood, but they're also its shadow, a place where goods and secrets flow freely, unchecked by law or conscience. The Erindor is no ordinary ship, and these tokens suggest a network that spans beyond our shores, but the safe will tell us more. At dawn, we move." The night stretches on, the room growing colder as the fire dies. Watson adds a log, the wood crackling as it catches, sending a brief flare of warmth through the air. He settles back into his chair, the revolver within reach, and watches Holmes, who has returned to the papers, his pen scratching notes in the margins, each stroke precise, deliberate. The air smells of burning wood now, mingling with the dust and ink, and Watson feels the weight of the hours, the city's quiet menace pressing against the walls. "Holmes," he says, his voice soft, almost hesitant, "do you ever wonder if we're in too deep? This syndicate, these men who don't forgive, they're not like the petty thieves we've chased before. This feels different." Holmes pauses, his pen hovering over the paper, and looks at Watson, his expression unreadable but his eyes warm, a rare glimpse of the man beneath the machine. "We're always in too deep, Watson," he says, his voice quiet but firm. "That's where the truth lives, in the depths where others fear to tread. But you're here, and that's enough." He returns to his notes, the moment passing, but Watson feels a quiet resolve settle over him, the bond between them stronger than any danger. The clock on the mantel ticks softly, marking the hours until dawn. Watson rises, crossing to the sideboard to pour a measure of brandy, the sharp, sweet scent cutting through the room's heaviness. He offers a glass to Holmes, who shakes his head, his focus unbroken. Watson sips, the warmth spreading through his chest, and settles back, his eyes drifting to the window, where the fog seems to pulse with secrets of its own. Can you feel the quiet, dear listener? The way the room holds its breath, the lamplight casting shadows that dance like ghosts, the faint taste of brandy lingering in the air. Imagine sitting here, the weight of a revolver at your side, the city's fog pressing against the glass, the promise of answers waiting in the dawn. What would you do standing on the edge of a mystery that could unravel a city's secrets? They prepare in silence, Holmes sorting papers, Watson checking his revolver once more, the routine a comfort against the unknown. The night is theirs for now, a fragile pause before the plunge, and they settle into it, two men bound by trust and purpose, ready to face whatever lies beyond the fog. The first light of dawn creeps through the fog over London, a pale, reluctant glow that barely pierces the heavy mist clinging to Baker Street. Inside 221B, the air is still, thick with the faint lingering sense of chamomile tea, now cold in its cups, and the acrid bite of Sherlock Holmes's chemical experiments abandoned on the cluttered table. The fire has long since died, leaving the room cool, the embers a faint memory of warmth. The papers from Edward Carver's mysterious crate remain spread across Holmes's desk, their cryptic symbols and altered manifests illuminated by the soft light of a single brass lamp, its glow casting long shadows across the worn rug. The leather pouch of tokens sits beside them, each spiral-etched piece glinting like a promise, or a threat. Sherlock Holmes stands by the window, his silhouette sharp against the grey light, his greatcoat already on, the damp wool carrying the faint scent of last night's fog. His fingers brush the key in his pocket, its cold metal a constant reminder of the puzzle that has consumed this once quiet Sunday. Dr. Watson, his revolver tucked into his waistband, adjusts his coat, the fabric heavy with the city's damp, and checks his watch, the soft tick a steady counterpoint to the silence. His shoulder aches, the old wound protesting the early hour, but his eyes are clear, his resolve unshaken. Edward Carver remains in the spare room, left under Mrs. Hudson's care, his part in this morning's venture deemed too dangerous by Holmes's quiet command. The room feels alive with anticipation, the air charged with the weight of what lies ahead. Outside, the city stirs slowly, the distant clatter of a milk cart and the low call of a street vendor cutting through the fog. The cobblestones glisten with dew, their slick surface catching the faint light, and the air smells of wet stone, coal smoke, and the faint sour tang of the Thames carried on the morning breeze. This is London at its rawest, a city waking to another day of struggle and secrets, where the line between order and chaos is as thin as the fog itself. Holmes turns from the window, his eyes gleaming with that relentless focus Watson knows so well. "The hour is upon us, Watson," he says, his voice low, almost hypnotic, like a whisper meant to soothe yet laced with steel. "The office first, then the docks. Harrow's safe holds the key to this, not the one in my pocket, but the truth behind his fear. We move quickly, quietly. The syndicate will be watching." Watson nods, his hand brushing the revolver, its weight a familiar comfort. The air smells of dust and old leather, with a faint trace of the brandy he sipped last night, its warmth a distant memory. "And if they're waiting for us," he asks, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of experience. "That man in the alley, he wasn't alone. That whistle proved it. We're walking into their territory, Holmes." Holmes's lips curve into a faint smile, the kind that appears when the game is truly afoot. "Then we shall play on their board, Watson, but by our rules." He picks up the leather pouch, slipping it into his coat, and gathers a few key papers, folding them carefully into an inner pocket. The safe will tell us what Harrow was hiding, names perhaps, or proof of the syndicate's reach, and the errand door, it sails at noon. We have little time. They step into the hall, the floorboards creaking softly under their boots, and descend the stairs, the air growing cooler as they leave the warmth of the room behind. Mrs. Hudson's kitchen sends up a faint scent of baking bread, a small comfort against the morning's chill, but they move past it, stepping out into the fog. The street is quiet save for the soft scuff of their footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the eaves. The gas lamps, still burning from the night, cast feeble halos, their light swallowed by the mist, and the air feels heavy, alive with the city's hidden pulse. Can you picture it, dear listener? The fog curling around you, cold and damp against your skin, the faint taste of coal dust on your tongue, the sound of your own breath loud in the stillness. Imagine walking these streets, the weight of a revolver at your side, the city's secrets pressing close, a man like Sherlock Holmes leading you into the unknown. What would you feel, stepping into a world where every shadow holds a clue, every silence a warning? They move swiftly through the streets, the fog parting reluctantly before them, toward Threadneedle Street and Harrow's office. The city is waking now, its sounds growing sharper. A vendor's cry, the clatter of shutters opening, the low rumble of a cart. The air smells of tar and wet wool, with a faint sweetness from a baker's shop they pass. Its warmth a fleeting temptation. Holmes's stride is purposeful, his eyes scanning every doorway, every alley, his mind a map of possibilities. Watson keeps pace, his limp barely noticeable today, his senses alert, the soldier in him ready for whatever lies ahead. The office looms ahead, its brick facade grimmer in the daylight, the peeling sign a silent testament to neglect. Holmes tests the door, finding it still unlocked from their midnight visit, and they slip inside, the air stale with the scent of old paper and ink. The clerk's room is as they left it, desks buried under ledgers, the gas lamp hanging silent overhead. Holmes moves to the door of Harrow's private office, his tools already in hand, the metal cool against his fingers. The lock gives way with a soft click, and they step inside, the air colder here, heavy with the mustiness of disuse. Harrow's office is small, dominated by a heavy oak desk, its surface cluttered with papers, and a single, unlit candle, its wax pooled and hardened. Behind the desk, set into the wall, is the safe carver described. Iron, solid, its combination lock gleaming faintly in the dim light filtering through a grimy window. Holmes kneels before it, his fingers brushing the dial, his ear close to the metal as he listens for the telltale clicks of the mechanism. Watson stands guard, his revolver drawn, his eyes on the door. The faint creak of the building settling around them a constant reminder of their vulnerability. "Any luck?" Watson whispers, his voice low, the air thick with tension. The room smells of dust and old wood, with a faint metallic tang that could be the safe or something less innocent. Holmes doesn't answer immediately, his focus absolute, his fingers moving with the precision of a surgeon. The dial turns, slow and deliberate, and then a soft thud, the sound of tumblers aligning. The safe door swings open, revealing a small, crowded interior. Inside, a leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed, sits beside a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, their wax seals broken, but still bearing the faint imprint of a spiral symbol. Holmes lifts the ledger, his eyes scanning the entries, his expression unreadable, but his fingers tightening slightly on the binding. "Names," he murmurs, "dates, payments." A record of transactions, but not for grain or opium. These are for artefacts. Rare, likely stolen, moved through the errand door to buyers across the continent. He opens the bundle of letters, scanning them quickly. And this, correspondence with a man named Krieger. Prussian, by the tone, and likely our friend with the red scarf. Harrow was their intermediary, but he tried to break free. That's why he's gone. Watson steps closer, his revolver still in hand, the air growing heavier with each revelation. "Artifacts?" he says, his voice low, incredulous. "You mean relics? Statues? Jewellery? That sort of thing? Why would a shipping clerk be involved in that?" Holmes's eyes gleam, a spark of triumph in their depths. "Because artifacts carry more than value, Watson. They carry power, provenance, history, secrets. The syndicate trades in what men will kill for, and Harrow was their weak link. He kept this ledger as insurance, but it sealed his fate." He tucks the ledger and letters into his coat, his movements swift, and closes the safe, the door shutting with a heavy thud. A sound from outside, a sharp scuff of boots on the pavement, cuts through the silence. Watson spins, his revolver raised, his heart pounding. Holmes's hand shoots up, signalling caution, and he moves to the window, peering through the grimy glass. The fog is thinner now, the street visible, and there, across the way, a figure stands. A man, tall, with a red scarf, his limp unmistakable. But he's not alone. Two others flank him, their faces obscured, their postures tense like wolves circling prey. "They've found us," Holmes says, his voice calm but urgent. "We leave now, through the back. The docks are our only chance to end this." He moves to the door. Watson closes behind, the air charged with the weight of danger. The ledger and letters feel heavy in Holmes's coat, a burden of truth that could unravel a syndicate or destroy them. They slip out the back, the alley narrow and slick with damp, the air thick with the smell of refuse and tar. The docks are not far, but the city feels alive now, its shadows hiding eyes that watch their every move. Watson's hand stays on his revolver, the metal cold and steady, while Holmes leads, his mind a beacon in the fog, guiding them toward Erindor and the heart of the mystery. Can you feel the pulse of this moment, dear listener? The chill of the alley against your skin, the faint taste of fear and resolve on your tongue, the sound of footsteps echoing in the fog. Imagine running through these streets, the weight of secrets in your pocket, the city's breath pressing close, a man like Sherlock Holmes as your guide. What would you do, racing toward a truth that could change everything? The fog of London's East India Docks is a living thing, curling through the air like breath, heavy with the scent of tar, salt, and the sour tang of the Thames. Dawn has given way to a pale, struggling morning, the sun a faint smear behind the mist, casting the docks in a ghostly half-light. The Erindor looms ahead, its hull a dark silhouette against the water, its mast creaking softly as it sways with the tide. The air is alive with the sounds of the docks, ropes groaning, gulls crying, the low shouts of dock workers muffled by the fog. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson move swiftly through the maze of crates and barrels, their boots silent on the damp planks, the ledger and letters from Harrow's safe tucked securely in Holmes's greatcoat. The key, that small, intricate piece of metal, weighs heavy in his pocket, its spiral etchings a silent promise of resolution, or ruin. Watson's hand rests on his revolver, the metal cool and familiar, his eyes scanning the shadows for the man with the red scarf or his shadowed companions. The air taste of salt and coal, sharp on his tongue, and the damp seeps through his coat, chilling his skin. His shoulder aches, the old wound protesting the relentless pace, but his resolve is unshaken, the soldier in him awake to the danger that hums in the fog. Holmes leads, his silhouette sharp and purposeful, his mind a beacon in the chaos of the docks. The city feels alive around them, its pulse a mix of labour and secrets, where every creak of a ship's hull could hide a threat. Can you imagine it, dear listener? The fog pressing against you, cold and clammy, the scent of the river filling your lungs, the weight of a mystery pulling you forward. Picture yourself here, the slick planks underfoot, the distant cry of a gull echoing in your ears, the city's heartbeat urging you on. What would you do, standing on the edge of a truth that could unravel a syndicate with Sherlock Holmes as your guide? They reach Erindor, its gangplank a narrow bridge to answers. Holmes pauses, his eyes scanning the deck where a few sailors move in the fog, their figures blurred, their voices low. "The captain's cabin," he murmurs, his voice soft but urgent. "If the key unlocks anything, it's there. Stay close, Watson." He steps onto the gangplank, his boots steady despite the sway, and Watson follows, his revolver drawn but held low, his heart pounding with the weight of the moment. The deck is slick with dew, the air heavy with the smell of rope and brine. A sailor glances their way, his face weathered, his eyes narrowing, but Holmes moves past him with the confidence of a man who belongs, his coat blending with the fog. The captain's cabin is at the stern, a small door marked with a faded brass plate. Holmes tests the handle, finding it locked, and produces the key, its etchings glinting faintly as he slides it into the lock. The mechanism clicks, smooth and precise, and the door swings open, revealing a cramped room lit by a single lantern, its light casting shadows across a cluttered desk and a narrow bunk. Inside, the air smells of tobacco and old wood, with a faint metallic tang that could be rust or blood. A safe sits in the corner, smaller than Harrow's but heavier, its surface etched with the same spiral pattern as the key. Holmes kneels before it, his fingers deft, his ear close to the metal as he turns the key. The lock yields with a soft thud, and the door opens to reveal a single object, a small ornate box, its surface inlaid with ivory and gold, its lock matching the key's design. Holmes lifts it, his movements reverent, and opens it to find a collection of papers, each marked with a spiral symbol and a single heavy medallion, its surface engraved with a name, Krieger. Watson leans closer, his breath catching, the air thick with the weight of discovery. Krieger, he whispers, his voice low. The man from the letters, the Prussian. This is the proof, isn't it? The syndicate's leader. Holmes nods, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Not just proof, Watson, the heart of their operation. These papers detail shipments of stolen artifacts moved through the errand door to buyers in Berlin, Paris, Vienna. Krieger is the linchpin, and Harrow was his pawn until he tried to break free. He tucks the papers into his coat, the medallion in his pocket, and closes the box, its lock clicking shut. A sound from the deck, a sharp whistle, the same as in the alley, cuts through the silence. Watson spins, his revolver raised, his heart pounding. They're here, he says, his voice steady despite the tension. Holmes moves to the door, peering out, his eyes narrowing as he spots three figures emerging from the fog. The man with the red scarf, his limp pronounced, flanked by two others, their hands hidden in their coats. Time to move, Holmes says, his voice calm but urgent. They slip out of the cabin, the decks slick underfoot, and make for the gangplank, but the figures block their path, their faces obscured by the fog. The man with the red scarf steps forward, his scar visible now, a jagged line across his cheek. You've gone too far, Mr. Holmes, he says, his voice low, accented. The key, the papers, hand them over, and you walk away. Holmes's smile is sharp, a blade in the fog. You mistake me for a man who bargains, he says. You're Krieger's errand boy, nothing more. Tell me where Harrow is, and I may let you keep your freedom. The man's eyes narrow, his hand moving to his coat, but Watson is faster, his revolver trained on the man's chest. Don't, he warns, his voice hard, the soldier's calm settling over him. The air is thick with tension, the fog swirling around them, the scent of brine and fear sharp in their lungs. The man hesitates, his companions shifting, their hands twitching toward hidden weapons. Then, from the fog, a new sound, a low shout, the thud of boots on the dock. The irregulars, Holmes's network of street boys, emerge, their small forms darting through the mist, shouting warnings to draw attention. The man with the red scarf curses, his eyes darting to the approaching dock workers, and he signals his companions to retreat, their figures vanishing into the fog. Holmes and Watson don't pursue, their prize already secured. They move quickly, slipping off the errand door and back into the maze of the docks, the papers and medallion heavy in Holmes's coat. The fog closes around them, the city's pulse steady now, its secrets exposed. They return to Baker Street as the sun finally breaks through, the fog lifting to reveal a city waking to a new day. Back in 221B, the fire is rekindled, its warmth pushing back the morning's chill. Holmes spreads the papers on his desk, his fingers tracing the names and dates, his mind already piecing together the syndicate's network. Watson sits, his revolver now back in its case, the ache in his shoulder easing in the fire's glow. "What now, Holmes?" he asks, his voice soft, the weight of the night lifting. "Krieger's out there and Harrow's still missing." Holmes leans back, his eyes half closed, a rare moment of stillness. "We've struck a blow, Watson. The papers will go to Lestrade, the medallion to Mycroft. The syndicate will scatter, and Krieger will run. As for Harrow..." He pauses, his expression softening. "I suspect he's alive, hiding, perhaps in fear for his life. We'll find him, in time." The room settles into a quiet calm, the air warm with the scent of burning wood and the faint sweetness of tea brewing downstairs. The mystery, for now, is resolved. The key secrets laid bare. Watson feels the city beyond the walls, its heartbeat steady, its shadows less menacing in the light of day. Can you feel it? The warmth of the fire, the weight of a mystery solved, the city's breath softening as the fog lifts. Picture yourself here, the taste of tea on your tongue, the sound of Holmes's pen scratching notes, the promise of a new day waiting outside. What would you do, having walked with Sherlock Holmes through the shadows, emerging into the light? That's our tale tonight, listeners. Share your thoughts, your city, your time zone. Are you with Aiko in Tokyo at dawn? With Omar in Cairo past midnight? With Sophia in Madrid as the sun sets? Or with Ethan in New York at first light? Like this episode, subscribe if you love these shadows. Keep your lanterns lit. Rest well until next time.